Enemy of the state.
An enemy of the state.
Enemy of the state.
Dank Pod-Stash.
You're listening to Enemy of the State's Dank Pod-Stash. Check out thedankpodstash.com to find every episode of the Dank Pod-Stash, links to support the show via our Bitbacker and Patreon, Dank Pod-Stash merchandise, and much more. If you'd like to advertise on the Dank Pod-Stash, email us at dankpodstash@gmail.com. Hey, this is your host, NonVotingNick. Before we jump into today's show, let me bring you a special offer from my friend Shane Radliff over at Liberty Under Attack Publications. Shane has an offer for Dank Pod-Stash listeners to take 10% off your order by using coupon code DANK10. Just go to libertyunderattack.com. Shane has books focusing on self-liberation, freedom strategies, solutions, and more. His current books are #Agora, Second Realm Book on Strategy, Ben Stone's Sedition, Subversion, and Sabotage, and Shane's very own Vanu, A Strategy for Self-Liberation, among others. He also offers assistance to new authors throughout the publishing process, editing, proofreading, formatting for Kindle and paperback, and full-service audiobook productions. That's Liberty Under Attack Publications. Share your story, find your freedom. I'd also like to give a shout-out to Bad Moon Hemp. Check out badmoonhemp.wordpress.com. Bad Moon Hemp is your one-stop shop for all your handmade hemp needs. I use Bad Moon Hemp's beard oil and beard balm. It's awesome stuff. Be sure to check them out and enjoy the show. All right, welcome fellow enemies of the state to episode 42 of Enemy of the State's Dank Pod-Stash. I'm your host, NonVotingNick, and I'm joined today by Arvin Vohra. Bit of an unusual guest for the show, but we're going to talk about some things and some stuff, casual conversation. Welcome to the show. Why don't you tell us a bit about you, Arvin?
Well, I think you guys know I'm running for president, and my goal in running for president is twofold. One, if I get elected, to end the welfare state and the income tax, to pardon all nonviolent offenders, drug offenders, folks like Julian Assange, Edward Snowden, Ross Ulbricht. But a really big part of this, a really big part of why I'm doing this, is I want to essentially use the machinery of the state to spread exactly the information that is most dangerous to the state. A simple example, when we're talking about things like jury nullification, if as many people in America knew what jury nullification was, that it had brought freedom of the press to America, as today now know where Aleppo is thanks to Gary Johnson, we would see a massive change in the functionality of the criminal justice system with people intentionally monkey wrenching it constantly. So I want to be able to encourage people to do things like that, to use this campaign to help people opt out of the state's abuse.
All right, right into the candidate pitch. So, and you're running through the Libertarian Party, correct?
That's true. That's true.
Okay, and would you say? I think I've heard you say before that you're an ANCAP. Would you say that you're an ANCAP?
That is a very accurate description, yes.
Okay, all right. Now, I've always found it strange that anarchists choose to participate in, politics in the U.S. and especially run for president. How does having no masters, how does that transfer to running for president? The pretty much most masterful position in the U.S.
Position, right. Yeah. And that's a fair question. I get that question a lot from other ANCAPs who say, if you're an ANCAP, why would you be doing this? And to me, this is something I'm doing versus the state. I'm not, inherently honestly participating in this electoral process. I'm trying to use the electoral process, the media it generates, the information it generates, to monkey wrench the system itself. So as a simple example, if I just say as a guy, we should do jury nullification, it's unlikely to trigger the media enough to cover it. But if I say as president, I'm going to be the partner in chief, and then also I'm encouraging everyone else to do jury nullification, it just creates a higher likelihood of sort of manipulating the mainstream media into covering it. And a lot of, sort of borderline media has covered it, bordering between libertarian media and mainstream. But I know for a fact that if I'm the nominee, we're going to get information like that out at such an explosive level that it's going to give people the tools to monkey wrench the state. Now, is it as good as, sort of taking over Congress, over the state machinery by force? I don't know. I mean, I like to be nonviolent when I can.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't advocate for that method myself. This is an agorist show. I'm an agorist, so this is all very opposite of my methods. Find it very strange. It sounds like what the term that Konkin coined, partyarchy. Using the state's methods to try to fight the state. That doesn't seem logical to me. It seems like the state's going to do everything it can to preserve itself. Seems like it's a big club, and they're the only ones in it. With the numbers the LP has put up, like, is this a realistic shot? Is this a thing that you think could happen?
I want to actually draw a distinction because you mentioned how this is parallel to the idea of partyarchy. I actually don't agree with that view because the goal here is not necessarily to get elected and then do things. It's to use the campaign, the electoral process itself, the media attention it generates to spread a very powerful and dangerous message. And it's a message that people want to keep silent. I mean, we all, those of us went to any kind of public, private, or whatever. Very few of us learned that freedom of the press came to the United States from jury nullification, people standing up to the state. Almost nobody knows that. And that's something that's intentionally hidden. I believe that information like that spread just through the campaign. I'm not saying taking over the state to do anything. I'm saying just using the campaign itself to get that message out there actually allows us to get some of these ANCAP ideas out in a way that's very immediately usable, that we can use sort of adversarially against the state. A simple example, one of the things that I talk about is the benefits of intentionally hanging a jury, right? Because the longer you drag out a trial, the less money that courtroom can take in. And courtrooms take in hundreds of thousands of dollars an hour. You stretch that out for, 10 hours, not only might you be setting a nonviolent person free, but you're also hamstringing the state's ability to take revenue to do the terrible things that it does, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I could see that depending on who they're taking the revenue from. I mean, the judge and everyone involved on the state side, that's still getting paid through those hours, through theft, obviously, through taxation. But I appreciate the idea of using
That's true. I mean, we can't shut down the tax side of that, but we can shut down a portion of the revenue side on that. Obviously, There's a lot of ways we can work on shutting down the tax side as well. We certainly get into that at some point.
Yeah. No, I appreciate the idea of using the campaign to raise awareness more than to actually use it to become someone in a position of power within the state. I think that's pretty much similar message to Dan Berman when we had him on here. That was a good show too. That it's always good to get the message out. I don't know, man. I'm kind of just blown away that people still use the methods that the Libertarian Party uses when the numbers are so dismal. And then we see something like the Storm Area 51 movement come up, and it's grown to millions of people, and it's being inundated with ideas. Besides storming Area 51, there's people talking about, look at what we can do when we get together. Why don't we storm other places? Why don't we do this? And a lot of mistrust in authority. It seems those type of, campaigns, for lack of a better term, are a better use of time. And they don't involve taxation funded anything in any way.
There's truth to what you're saying. I mean, I do agree that those are really good campaigns. To me, they work together. I mean, there are people who are going to respond to a Storm Area 51 campaign that are not going to respond to a political campaign. They're just not going to care. And there's also people who will notice and respond to a political campaign, if it's my political campaign, often very angrily, but they will respond. So as a simple example, when I say things like, killing for the state in the military is murder plus statism, that infuriates a group of people that are simply ignoring what's happening with the Storm Area 51 movement. When I say that government schools are welfare, and which I firmly believe they are, and that they need to go, and they're damaging education, they're horrible morality, they're setting the worst standard. When I say that, people not necessarily positively notice it, but they notice it And again, those people are just like, yeah, the Area 51 stuff is a joke. So I think it's just another avenue to bring these messages out there to change culture. Because what they want to do is they want us to shut up, right? I mean, that's their goal. Recently, for my political Facebook post, I recently got banned from a local social dance event, a small local social dance event. It's not that I particularly cared, but it shows that their goal is to use any method necessary to shut us up. And I think we need to use any method necessary to get our ideas out there.
Interesting. So how are you looking as far as getting those messages out there? How's that looking for you? What are we looking at? Success, mediocre, failure? What are we looking at for your campaign?
So far, it's been bigger reach than I've ever got for anything I've done previously, right? So I was the vice chair for 2 terms. I spent 1 term as kind of a nice vice chair, the second term being honest and bold. And it's fair to say that my second term, people didn't like it too much, but they certainly heard the message. I don't think anybody, involved in the LP didn't hear that the vice chair had called military murderers, or didn't hear that he'd called government schools welfare, didn't hear any of that kind of stuff. So the message got out there to a certain extent when I was vice chair. When I'm running for president, I can say that the message has gone out much farther. I've gotten many more major media interviews, many more libertarian media interviews, anarchist media interviews, gotten the message much farther than I ever have before. Is that, are we going to call that success or failure? I mean, to me, it's improvement. That's what I look for, to increase that. This year I want to reach this many people, next year, hopefully twice that, the year after that, hopefully twice that, to get more people to understand, to know these ideas. Even if they disagree with them, at least to know that those are ideas that exist.
Sure. So what attracted you to the method that you're pursuing now versus, say, an agorist method of building a competing society that competes with the state, withdrawing from the state and defending against the state, versus kind of going into the fold, like not necessarily going into the fold, but using similar methods that the state generally uses?
I wouldn't say that I have chosen one over the other by any means. I mean, that's just simply not true.
There's a big difference between running a presidential campaign and completely withdrawing from the state.
No, the presidential, you're right about the presidential campaign. The presidential campaign is one of the things that I do with my life, but it is not the only thing.
Yeah,
my
absolutely.
entire business is online. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm focusing more on the campaign aspect.
One of the things that a major part of my life is my business is online education. We take no government subsidies. We follow no government laws. And the reason specifically that we work so hard to turn this online is I want people to have the maximum movement to travel between countries with minimum personal disruption. I want people to say, I don't want anyone to say, well, I guess I need to stay in this state or this country for education. I want people to say, listen, Dan Berman's in Mexico. Mexico has better laws, or Southeast Asia has better laws, or some part in Africa has better laws, or Canada has better laws. And the idea is I want people to be free to go wherever either they're the fewest laws or like the most poorly enforced laws or whatever. So that's a big part of it. One of the things, and I've been talking to Dan about this a bit as well, one of the things that I really encourage, that I've talked a lot in my book, Pull Out, Men, Modern Life, and Mutiny, is that we do need to work on getting out of the restricted area of the United States. We need to work on going to places where we can do whatever it is that we want. Pay no taxes, follow no laws, either because there simply are no taxes or the enforcement mechanism is too weak to enforce it. And so that's some of the things that I also work on. I don't think that opting out is a bad idea. I mean, I wrote a whole book on it. I think it's a fantastic idea. To me, I'm just using more than one method at the same time.
Interesting. It's interesting you bring up the ability to leave and go to different places with better or non-existent laws. With the U.S. now, what are they, revoking passports, just completely getting rid of passports of people who owe back taxes. The IRS is starting to crack down on that. What do you think about that?
Yep. They've been doing that. There's actually a second thing they've been doing along those lines, which is in the past, if you wanted to get rid of your U.S. citizenship, and that means if you're living in another country, no longer pay American income taxes. In the past, the cost was a few $100s, and then they increased it, and then they increased it. And every time there was a record number of people tearing up their citizenships, they've increased it. I think it's like $4,000 now if you want to just to say, I don't want to be a citizen anymore. So they understand the threat that this poses. They get that the more, if it didn't pose a threat, they wouldn't charge anything for it. They get that as more people try to opt out, their control, their source of revenue, all that kind of stuff gets diminished. So I mean, what they're doing, I think, is absolutely morally abhorrent. I'm happy to see many countries finding and experimenting with ways to create blockchain-based citizenship and whatnot. So I do think that their system is not going to work in the long run. Right now, though, it is creating an unnecessary nuisance.
Nice. Can you speak a little more about the blockchain-based registration for passports?
So there's a few countries. I mean, Estonia is experimenting with some of these ideas, and the ideas are in their infancy right now. I mean, I think they have a lot of promise. I don't think they're there yet, but the idea to me in the long run would be that you might find yourself either totally stateless if you wanted to, or you might find yourself as a citizen of maybe a blockchain-based nation, an online nation, a digital nation, where that nation would provide you the things that normal nations provide, which in my opinion is very, very little, but other people find other things that they do like more than I do. I don't think that it's bad to have services. I think it's bad to be forced to pay for services that you don't want to pay for, that you don't want to use. And so if somebody says, listen, I want to be part of this, digital nation, and here's the things they provide dispute resolution, contract enforcement, whatever it is that they find useful, that to me is fantastic, as opposed to nothing the state does is beneficial, but I have to pay for it anyway. That to me is morally wrong.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I'm going to have to look into that more. Might have to do a whole episode on that. That's pretty exciting stuff. So, yeah.
No doubt. It is stuff out there.
Yeah. So besides Area 51 in the media right now, which I think could possibly be a distraction with the whole Epstein and pedophilia stuff going on, that's got to be. I haven't heard much from the Libertarian Party about that, and the pedophilia, trafficking, and all that within government. Is the Libertarian Party addressing this? Are you addressing this in your campaign? Is it worrisome to come up against a government that supports this? And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So if you people talk about how we need the government to stop sex trafficking, right? And I mean, I agree with the sentiment that sex trafficking is bad, but if you look at the actual behaviors of the government, there's two things that really stand out to me as problematic. The first is one of the biggest areas of sex trafficking right now is the government-run foster care system. Many major newspapers have written about this horrific thing, and a lot of these people who are in the foster care system have been forcibly separated from their parents. Their parents, are sent to prison for some non-crime, marijuana or whatever. Their kids are forcibly taken from them and then put in a situation that has a very high rate of sex trafficking of kids. And so to me, that's showing at least incompetence in terms of execution. I mean, it's not that their intention is to have trafficking, but the result certainly has been. But there is another thing that to me is even more troubling, because it shows not just incompetence of execution, but incompetence of intent. Recently, it unanimously passed the House, was a ban on child sex doll trafficking. And what that means is Congress decided that given limited law enforcement and monetary resources, obviously I think they should have none, but I think everyone agrees that they have a limited amount. They don't have an unlimited budget. Given that limited amount, that they're going to choose to spend their resources on dolls rather than actual children. If somebody wants to have sex with a doll, I mean, I just don't care. Yeah, I might think it's weird, but if that's what they want to do, it's a doll. Who's being hurt? Who cares? But when you're diverting resources away from actual children who are actual people and trying to protect dolls, that to me is incompetence at a very deep level. So when we see that, they say that there are pedophiles in the government. Yeah, I mean, there's pedophiles everywhere, and it's not unique to government, but that the government is trying to stop it in ways that are either totally ineffective in terms of the foster care system, which is the center of child sex trafficking, or just idiotic when they're spending the money on dolls, that to me says that this is not an organization that can be trusted to in any way handle this.
Sure. And I think that term comes up a lot when we're talking about the clear and proven ties of pedophilia within government. Is the government is doing this, the government is doing that. When it's multiple factions, there's intelligence and all the different agencies and whatnot that are doing different things, and who knows who's supporting what and who's fighting what. That seems to be something that needs to be clarified, because I believe it was the same NYPD team that kind of broke Pizzagate, I guess, that also broke the Epstein story, that made the arrests and whatnot, and that's government. But there was obviously other government at work in trying to keep it hush-hush with the ties that they've had.
You'll often see, we've seen, for example, in Syria, that you have two different sides funded or armed by two different parts of the U.S. government, fighting and killing each other. Now, of course, with American weapons, more advanced technology. So I think the point that government is often fighting itself with our tax money and making problems worse, I think that's certainly a fair, just general observation of government.
Yeah, fighting itself not only with tax money that's been taken, but probably for allocation of that money, and for whatever.
Also true. In the weapons case, if a department doesn't use its budget, it often gets penalized. So they will maximize their budget, even if that involves arming people against a different wing of government who's now maximizing their budget to fight the first wing of government in another country, harming their citizens, putting the lives of Americans at risk, creating enemies, and just doing the worst things you can possibly do with any kind of money. I always have to laugh when people say, well, without government, people couldn't handle their money. I don't know anyone in the world as an individual who's insane enough to spend their personal money funding both sides of a civil war.
No, we know people in the world who are not necessarily even insane, but in it to do that. We've heard of that. The Rothschilds have done that since the beginning of banking that they invented, pretty much, but funding both sides of different things. But I want to kind of rewind back to something that you said before about some of your messages pissing people off. What happens after they get pissed off?
Yeah. A couple things happen. Some people get pissed off and they stay pissed off, and then they tell everybody else how pissed off they are, which ends up spreading the message. You can't see it in somebody's personal life, but you can see it on Facebook. It is funny where I'll write something about government schools being welfare. Somebody will share, be like, look at what a terrible person this is. And everyone's like, yeah, that's a bastard. I hate that guy. It goes down, down, down. And then like 20 people down, someone's like, hey, that's kind of interesting. I kind of agree with that. And so it's like they get almost like tricked into spreading the message for me. So that's one group. Other groups, people just get mad and fume and nothing happens. And a surprisingly large group takes time, and a surprisingly large number of people have come around to agreeing with some of the things that initially infuriated them. And I've been going to many different states, talking at state conventions, and I have been personally just honestly shocked at how many people have indicated that, and shocked at how many people who are some of my most vocal opponents have later either said they now support me publicly, or have supported me in straw polls or hand raising polls, whatever you call it. It is interesting to see that if nothing else, libertarians tend to be willing to consider all ideas, even the ideas that they initially hate.
So you say you've been going around to different libertarian state conventions?
Yeah.
Okay.
We've had a few different ones with debates, somewhere I've just been invited to speak.
Yeah. I've caught some of your debates with Hody Johns, bits and pieces of them. But as far as going around to the different conventions and whatnot, I do have a few people, more than a few, quite a few people in the Libertarian Party on my friends list. And holy shit, has this year just seemed like an absolute shit show of fighting and calling people out. What the hell is going on with that in the LP? Or is that, relegated to Facebook? It seems like it's a little further out than that.
Oh, it's further out than that for sure. So I don't think this is actually restricted to the Libertarian Party. I think this is something that's changed in American politics. And I think that basically there's a couple things that have happened. First, social media has allowed people to say nasty things, walk away, and not have to deal with the immediate social consequences, right? But it's also desensitized them to those social consequences. So now those same people just feel more comfortable doing it in real life as well. It's just kind of changed the way that they view interaction with other people. Politics has gotten much more brutal, much more acrimonious than it ever was in the past. And I've been living in DC since I was a kid. It is different here now than it ever was before. From little things where you see how people talk about each other, to things where, if somebody wears any Trump campaign clothing, it's often treated like you're like hate speech or something like that. To things that I've faced where, because of my political views, I've been banned from social events that are not political events, where I've never mentioned a single political word at the event. But the desire on both sides to silence the other side, or all the sides to silence the other sides, as well as this kind of retreating into your own personal group that you agree with, that to me is, I don't think that's just an LP thing. That to me is a politics thing right now.
Yeah, I can agree with that. That's interesting that you brought up that DC seems different than ever before, because I was thinking about that today, and I've been thinking about it for a while, that it's been fucking bizarre since around, Trump running for president, and since then. Things just seem a lot weirder, a lot more hostile, and like you said, a lot more people trying to silence each other rather than just argue back and forth. I was about ready to write that off as, well, just getting older, paying more attention to things. But that's interesting to hear that you see the same.
It is really different. I mean, here's the thing that I noticed. Here's what really brought it home to me, that I realized it wasn't just in my head. Usually when I would go from DC to New York, I'd be like, man, New York is a high intensity. It's kind of stressful to be here. It's fun, but it's an intense place to be. The last couple times I've gone from DC to New York, I've been like, wow, people are real chill here. This is a real relaxing place to be. And I don't think New York has changed at all. I think DC has gotten so hostile, so intense. There's most groups have what I call tribal beliefs, like things that you must believe, otherwise you're violating some sacred precept. And anyone who violates those is usually, any group will try to silence them. I think that so many groups now are just trying to use social and silencing pressure rather than political debate, that it's turned from debate and discussion to pure enmity.
Yeah, it seems like things are kind of boiling up a bit, and I'm wondering, I've had a conversation with people outside of the show, it seems like things might boil over in a more intense way than they have before. And I deal in memes quite a bit. That's part of the inspiration for the name of the show. I like the idea, like you said, of pissing people off and making them think about stuff. And specifically before Storm Area 51, reared its head up, the Boogaloo memes, a second civil war or collapse of the government, that stuff has been getting really intense. And it seems like that mindset around that idea that's going to happen, the want for that to happen, and then things like Storm Area 51, and especially the offshoots with storm the White House, storm the Federal Reserve, storm the Vatican, all that stuff. It seems like people are struggling to find an outlet for their frustrations, and it looks like some major dissent might be that outlet.
I think there's a very big chance of that. I mean, I think one of the most interesting debates on this is the debate about Civil War statues. And I've talked to so many people about this, and most of the people who are like, it's part of our history, I don't want to tear it down. Most are people who I know are not racist. Many are minorities who, it wouldn't make any sense for them to be racist in that particular way. I think there is this attempt to classify the Civil War as purely about racism and slavery. And I'm not saying that's not a part of it. There's a huge part of it, but there was, in the minds of many, another part, this the government can't tell us what to do part. And I think there's a very emotional connection to that for a lot of people. If you take the show Firefly, which gives a very different perspective on the Civil War, that show caught people's imaginations in a very deep and personal way. And so today, when people are saying we got to tear those statues down, I think it's bothering people, I think, in a way that has nothing to do with race at all. It has nothing to do with slavery at all. It has something to do with the feeling that the state is trying to silence one of its enemies. And I think more and more of us are feeling like, well, we're also enemies of the state. We've also been silenced. We're also tired of being silenced. And right now, when you see things like storming Area 51, I think Area 51 is basically being a symbol of the entire state itself. I think when people are saying I want to storm Area 51, it's kind of like you're saying, like, I want to punch that guy in the face. You're not necessarily that particular about that it has to be the face, right? It means you just want to damage that person. I think that's the spirit behind a lot of this.
Yeah, that's a great observation for that. I agree completely. Yeah, the problem with reaching that boiling point, reaching an economic collapse, whatever you have, I don't think that the majority of people would move into a more free way of living if it happened tomorrow. I think people would rebuild government, like, no question. I don't think the majority of people don't share.
That's actually something I said.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I've actually made that exact point in many states now at their parties. And I've pointed out the simple fact is that if we don't change this culture and we knock down the entire government, we got the ANCAP dream, no government, that this culture would rebuild this exact government tomorrow. And we saw that earlier this year with the partial government shutdown, where both Democrats and Republicans, and I don't just mean politicians here, I'm talking about individual citizens, clamored to bring back what little bit of government had been shut down. Even the LNC decried the fact that the shutdown had inconvenienced the lives or thrown the lives of federal workers into turmoil. That's the Libertarian National Committee is still kind of in that mindset. So, back to a much earlier point about running for office, to me, we have to change culture. If we change this culture, it's going to knock down this government. And we see this with marijuana legalization. The culture's okay with marijuana, and soon the government's going to be okay with marijuana, albeit at an unnecessarily highly taxed level. The same way, if we change this culture in other areas, saying, stop worshiping military service, stop joining the military, stop joining the police. The stop joining the police stuff is already working. It is working. I've seen billboards in states that are advertising to join the police department in a different state because the police departments can't get enough people to sign up. So those are the types of voluntary, nonviolent opt-outs that reflect positive changes in culture, and those things make a big difference.
Absolutely. Yeah, and so I appreciate that the idea of your campaign is to get the awareness out there. And I guess my biggest hang-up, and probably most people listening's biggest hang-up, is the platform from which you're getting that information out there. Because it seems like such a state method. Because, presidential campaign.
Yeah.
And it seems like coming from that platform, it's not coming across as, hey, you can do this yourself. It's, hey, I have these ideas and I'm running for this position of power.
I mean, there's a couple of points I want to make there. I mean, one is to a certain extent how you present it, right? I always say that first I'm going to be a partner in chief, and second, you can be the partner in chief right now. So it's basically the second sentence of my speech on the topic is always about what you can do right now. So there's some sort of technical things there. But I want to use an example. I went on Aryan Radio on Chris Cantwell's show, who's a white nationalist, on where we're going to realistically have a lot of disagreements. And I went there to talk about abolishing the welfare state, ending the state, not because I thought that this would be the best platform to use. It was because it was a platform to get the message to a group of people. White nationalists are people, in my opinion, who are misled. I don't think that they're all horrible, terrible people. They have real terrible ideas, though, and that I think I would like to change. And so I want to bring the idea to them, right? And just like I believe that hardcore racists are good people with really terrible ideas, I also think that statists are by and large good people, but with really terrible ideas. So I'm going to where they are. I'm trying to bring the message to them where they are and show them that there is another thing that you could do. I want people right now. I mean, there are hardcore statists, right? But most statists are just not hardcore statists. They're like, yeah, this is how it is. They haven't thought about these ideas that you and I think about. We're talking about things like blockchain countries and cryptocurrencies. And all. They just haven't thought about this. They haven't thought about jury nullification. Then jury duty is a nuisance that's going to make them late for work one day. They just see it differently. And that to me, if that's where they're listening, that's where I'm going to go. If the only place that people are going to listen is a Klan rally, I'll go to the Klan rally to talk to them. Not because I believe in the Klan, because that's just where the audience happens to be at the time.
Interesting. Crap, totally lost my train of thought there. That is interesting. As far as changing the culture, I do see quite a bit as I talk to people in real life, more and more than online. I'm trying to move away pretty hard from talking online because I fucking hate it. I'm over it. It's just depressing and ridiculous. But in rural Washington, where I am, a place that you would not think is very anarchist or libertarian friendly. I'm not over on the left or the west side. I'm on the east side in the country, and I find this everywhere. People just want to be left alone and are not backing up the idea of government other than what seems like a knee-jerk reaction when you bring something up. When you're talking to people outside of the Libertarian Party or other anarchists, what are you finding like that?
I'm finding exactly what you're saying, and I'm finding that on both sides. I'm finding that in rural areas and like deep red state areas and blue state areas, if you listen carefully to their language, you find that the thing that they're afraid of is oppression by the government. You can take the most hardcore statist Democrat ever, and you ask, what are their fears? And their fear is that the government is going to control women's bodies. That's their big, huge fear, that the government is going to use that terrifying force of the state to force you to carry a baby to term. And that scares them, right? Because they're scared of government force. Now, I'm not, the point here is not to get in the pro-life, pro-choice debate, but the point is like, that's what they're afraid of. They are afraid of the government. They're not afraid of a person telling them not to have an abortion. They're not afraid of social pressure. They're afraid of that limitless force of the state. When you talk to people who are more conservative leaning, you hear the same thing. The government's going to force them to teach their kids things they don't want to teach their kids. The government's going to force their kids to have attitudes that they don't feel comfortable with. The government's going to force them to, at a most basic level, to pay taxes for stuff they don't agree with. So both on the left, the deep, deep left, and the hardcore right, we're seeing that same underlying fear of government force. And it's fear right now that the other guy will get the government force. And we're like, okay, we don't want that guy to get the government force. We want our guy to get the government force. But it's still fear of government force. And just like the whole world would probably be happier if there was no such thing as a nuclear weapon, right now, both the left and the right and the middle and everyone would be happier if there was no government force to be afraid of.
It's interesting because it falls back into this circular pattern as well. Is I don't want the government to force me to do X, or more specifically, take my money for X by force. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to give my money to the government. Well, I'm going to allow the government to take my money for Y, so that X won't happen.
Exactly.
That's something I find around the border control argument quite a bit. Is I don't want the government to take my money to give to immigrants, so I'm going to let them take my money to stop them from taking my money to give to immigrants.
Exactly.
It's weird.
That's a really accurate description.
It's simple. I try to make it as concise as possible because I know quite a few people, outside of the general agorist and anarchist circles who are afraid of that. And when you lay it out like that, you kind of get that look like, what? and then just total mind meltdown. And they usually, unfortunately, revert back to their original way of thinking because it's uncomfortable to think outside of what you've thought for a long time.
It took me a very long time. When I started out as a libertarian, I was basically a centrist. I wasn't really a libertarian. I learned more about the ideas. I kind of became more minarchistic. I learned, somebody told me about anarcho-capitalism. I thought it was an insane idea. And I started to learn more about it. And it takes a long time. This process took years, right? And I was already like predisposed to it. I was predisposed. It still took years. So I mean, it's not a quick process. It's never going to be.
So what made you land at ANCAP versus, say, just straight Black Flag anarchist or any other of the hyphens? Why the hyphen?
So to me, it's when I think what does the long-term world look like, right? What does an ideal long-term world look like? And to me, I don't imagine nation states anymore. I don't even imagine city states. I imagine just like private areas that people set up. And I imagine different areas having different rules the way we do in the private sector. I mean, there are restaurants where you have to wear a jacket and tie if you want to go to that restaurant. And I can totally imagine somebody saying like, listen, in this, 2-acre country, you need to wear a coat and tie. If you don't want to go to a different country, I don't care. And giving people that idea of extreme choice in how to live. I don't think that people should be forced to live with no laws. And I don't think that people should be forced to live with a lot of laws. I think that we live in a culture with technology that would allow us to live with the laws of our choosing. And so so when I think of anarcho-capitalism, the idea is I do want there to be many, like thousands, millions of tiny competing, for lack of a better word, country, but without the idea of force behind it.
Interesting. That's an interesting vision for the future. I know there's a lot of people who don't like the idea of privatizing everything. Agorism being left libertarian, that's not popular to a whole lot of people. What do you tell the people who would prefer horizontal hierarchies or if whatever, anything like that that's anti-capitalist?
And to me, that's the beauty of this type of system is if you're like, listen, on this like 1 acre of land, we don't use money. We don't do any of that kind of stuff. As long as there's no property taxes, which obviously I oppose property taxes, you could keep doing that indefinitely. Or you could say like, listen, I'm donating like these 5 acres, and on these 5 acres, that's what we do. And if you want to use money, too bad. Mm-hmm. I mean, that to me is it's so easily allowed in that. And that's why I really do believe this idea of what Adam Kokesh calls localization, what I call free market privatization of countries. It's all of those things come to the same idea that we can have choice. I think you should have as many choices of what kind of a country, for lack of a better word, that you want to live in as today you have choices of the type of restaurant you go to.
Nice, interesting. What do you think of some of the candidates? I think the ones that I've seen garnering the most attention, especially through libertarians, would be probably Yang and Tulsi Gabbard. And I think they're appealing. Well, Yang is appealing, obviously, through memes, even if he didn't put those out there. The Yang Gang memes are pretty popular, secure the bag and whatnot. But other than that, his platform or his stance on AI and how to handle that. And then I believe Tulsi Gabbard's more, pull out of the Middle East, anti-war. From what I understand, I don't follow it very closely. Would you say those would be some of the libertarian candidates' biggest competitors, and how would you handle running against them?
Emotionally, yes. I mean, so I think that the Libertarian Party has lost its way in a certain sense, which is that it believes that its job is to be like the nice party. We're nice, we're friendly, we're harmless. And so Gabbard and Yang are nice and friendly. But I don't believe that the Libertarian Party is supposed to be the nice party. I don't think it's supposed to be the mean party either. I think it's supposed to be the anti-state party. It's supposed to be the cut government party, abolish public schools, and the welfare state and the income tax party. Yang's view on AI is wrong. I don't know what else to say about it. If a certain amount of labor can produce more stuff, it increases the demand for labor. It doesn't decrease the demand for labor. Every innovation since the cotton gin has shown that. I've seen that in my own business. In my business, we've been building up the AI that we use, and the result has been that the managing director, all of our instructors are working constantly 10 times as much as we ever were before, because a certain amount of our work now produces so much greater efficiency. So the idea that AI or that efficiencies make the lower demand for labor, it's just false. It's just not true. It's bad economics. So on one, I just disagree with that. And so obviously I then disagree with the follow-up UBI of universal welfare. I think it's a ridiculous idea. It's a bad idea. It would be a bad response even if the first thing was true. And the first thing is not even true. I think what Yang and a lot of people are not seeing is the following fact. I just want to use an analogy. Imagine that a grape farmer in 1900 could produce 40 pounds of grapes. And the next year he could produce 50 pounds of grape, but the government took 10 pounds. And this went on until now he's producing 4,000 pounds of grapes. The government's taking 3,690 pounds, and he doesn't think anything's different, right? Our work is not vanishing. Today, we work harder than our grandparents ever did. It's not vanishing. It's going to build aircraft carriers. It's going to build private prisons. That work is going somewhere. And the reason that we're working so hard and not getting as much as we should is because that labor is being transferred to idiotic purposes, through direct taxes, through hidden taxes. So the right answer here is not that we're not as productive because we're more productive because of AI, but that productivity is being stolen. If we end all taxes, we're going to be getting that surplus of capitalism back for the last 100 years. We're going to have so much plenty. It's almost impossible to consider. Gabbard is right about the Middle East, that we need to get out of there, but it's not just getting out of the Middle East. We need to get out of NATO. NATO is the worst thing we can possibly be in. We're giving military welfare to all of Europe, enabling their socialism at our cost. And so I would get out of NATO right away.
It's interesting, the point you brought up about the LP. And I find it very strange that even though I don't think that it's a good strategy to have an anti-state party, I don't know. We're not going to go back into that. We've been there. But I find it strange how far people range out from the Libertarian Party when they claim to be a part of the Libertarian Party, supporting Democrats or Republicans. Why are they there? Why is anybody in there if they're just going to run to the other parties?
I'm actually not total. I mean, it's a question that I've been asking myself a lot over the last years, and there is something. It's like, I work with a lot of kids on the standardized test, and it's very common for people to get a wrong answer on a reading question, and it's always they choose like D, the last answer. They're like, it's not A, it's not B, it's not C, it must be D. Super common mistake. And I think a lot of people come to the Libertarian Party in the same way. They're not Democrat, not Republican, it must be a Libertarian. Well, maybe you are, but maybe you're not. Right now, if you ask in the Libertarian Party, who's the most opposed to government schools, a lot of people are going to say me. But that question should not be answerable. Ending public schools is universal. It's part of minarchism, classical liberalism, obviously anarchism of every kind. And the fact that you can point to one person who holds that view more strongly is insane. It is unbelievable we've gotten to that point. And so I really think the Libertarian Party platform is incredible, but the actual party, I think, is very strongly drifted away from the platform.
Would you think that's from recruiting from outside parties? See a lot of pandering to different, Democrats, Republicans, or whatever to try to get a big name.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly. That's the basic cause. We had Bob Barr, we had Gary Johnson, we had Gary Johnson again. All of those are people who are not really anti-state people. Bob Barr publicly talked about how he did not want to end the drug war. Gary Johnson refused to speak on the subject. Gary Johnson emphasized that we support a social safety net, which we don't. He talked about the fair tax. And so he becomes a representative of libertarianism. And people are like, yeah, that must be what libertarianism is. And this doesn't just affect the idiots out there. It also affected the idiot right here. You can look on YouTube. There are places of me speaking at Campaign for Liberty in favor of the fair tax. And the reason that I was speaking in favor of it is because Gary Johnson was speaking in favor of it. And I thought that he was right. So it does bring in wrong-headed thinking, not necessarily the wrong people, but it certainly teaches the people wrong things. And then they believe it because they see the standard bearer doing it.
Interesting. That's similar to my thoughts about the party in general, is seeing the standard bearer doing something and it's a wrong thing. Participation in politics.
No, I heard that. I know where you're coming from.
Yeah.
I mean, it's certainly, when I see people running for office as a libertarian, but doing it in a statist way, I have a big problem with that. I used to run the Libertarian Party's official podcast, and I had a rule that we'd have between 2 and 4 candidates on every week. And I had a rule that if we could just get through a show without any candidate advocating for some increase in government, so either they just had to say nothing or talk about a decrease, I would put the show on the national Facebook page. And I almost never did. Maybe once or twice the whole time did people actually make that cutoff. So it is a problem. It's not just that the methods are statist, it's that the content also becomes statist. It is an endemic problem in the Libertarian Party without question.
Mm-hmm. So, and you mentioned before when I brought up your methods specifically that you were doing things outside of running for president. There's lots of other stuff. So let's say that the platform of the Libertarian Party wasn't here, so you couldn't run a campaign like this. You didn't have that option to get these ideas out there. How else would you be getting them out there, and why aren't you doing that instead of running for president?
I mean, a lot of those ideas are things that I believe, that I am doing, and I believe would be enhanced by the media attention that comes from presidential run. One of my major goals, long-term goals, I want to create kind of a network of informal, what I call America towns, similar to the current expat communities, but that are really designed to like welcome and encourage people to other countries, so that we essentially are throwing countries into regulatory competition. So let's say you're in like America town in like Cambodia, for example, and let's say Cambodia starts passing a bunch of stupid laws. Then I want you to be able to seamlessly transition to America town, say in Mexico. I want the idea that I want to have like a broad base of high earning, American or European or even local people whose belief is this, that they are going to be more nomadically capitalist, are going to do the things that benefit them, and are simply not going to put up with government regulation at all. And they're going to do that by just moving to wherever it's the least annoying. So that's definitely one of my goals. I mean, I've been doing it. I talked about it in my book, Pull Out Men, Modern Life and Mutiny. I talk about it, when the opportunity arises at various Libertarian convention or, on your show today. That's one thing I would do. The other thing that I would do, and definitely am doing, is in education, I believe that a very real educated populace, I don't mean indoctrinated, I mean educated with math and logic and critical reading and grammar and all that kind of stuff, is going to seek freedom. So I work in education. That's what I'm working to do. In my educational business, we don't indoctrinate in any one direction or another. We provide many different perspectives, and because there's an implicit assumption that my bias might be a little bit more anarchistic, we usually do our best when it makes any sense to do so, to start with the opposite view, the statist view, the most statist view. The first thing in our advanced reading that people read is Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan, specifically because it's the thing I disagree with the most. And I want people to get the opposite view from a very skilled, very intelligent writer. I don't want there to be indoctrination. To me, we need to separate school and state for sure, but we also need to separate education from indoctrination.
Now, those all seem like much better endeavors than a presidential campaign to me, man. I like that. It's
that way to me too.
Yeah, I hear you. So just what would you do though to get the word out there? Like socially, because you're using the platform to get the word out there, right? Would you start a podcast? Would you advertise? Like the projects sound great, but how would you get it out there if it wasn't a presidential campaign?
So I mean, obviously, one of the ways I'm using right now is the attention generated by the presidential campaign. I mean, in terms of business strategy, when we're talking about my educational business, we use pretty standard stuff. We send out brochures and we put Facebook ads. It's not that our advertising is so different. The biggest thing is that we just have very long-term clients, and we get a lot of folks from word of mouth, simply because when people come here, they're like, whoa, this is really different. This is a very different thing than any other kind of education I've ever done. And, the kids, teenagers, they might not be able to express exactly what's different about it, but they know it's different. So that's just building any business. I don't think that's very different, that we just not anything so very different from what anybody else would do in a similar position. When it comes to the idea of getting people overseas, a lot of that is building out the infrastructure to do it, right? And so we've been working so much in our own business about ways to work online better. We've been using different online tools, building our own tools to make that better. Because I know this, that if you can work from overseas and also provide education for your kids overseas, you're going to have many more people considering countries that they might not have otherwise considered. And so that to me is, it's not a legal change, because you can go and you can move to Denmark right now. It's not there's any law against it. It's a cultural change that says I can move to Denmark and I won't have any economic or educational issues. So it's really, a lot of it is about making that hurdle, which seems so daunting, just much lower, just making it easier.
Awesome. How do you feel about the parts of campaigning, or even past campaigning, casting ballots and whatnot, the parts that are funded by taxation, the people that are counting the ballots, the equipment itself, all that? What is your stance on the participation in that, on using that stolen money through this method?
I mean, I hate it. I think it's absolutely horrible. I mean, it's one of those things where, in what I view this as more of a non-violent military attack, right? And I mean, I wish that wasn't there. I mean, I don't think it should be there. I don't think that state-run ballots are morally okay. And so the question then becomes, the question I ask is there a marginal additional cost of any significance? In other words, are the ballots going to cost more because I'm running, or is there going to be a difference in price? And there isn't really. And the second is there a way to stop it? And to me, yeah, there is a way to stop it, which is to get some of these really big ideas out there. I want to give you one simple example. The least popular thing in the entire budget is foreign aid. It's the first thing to cut. Everyone wants to cut it. Democrats want to cut it. Republicans want to cut it. Everyone wants to cut it. But if they did that, then countries would run out of money. Then they would sell sovereign land, and then you'd have a lot of competing countries, and that's exactly what the United States doesn't want. But that's not what the government ever says, right? They say, oh, if we do that, they're going to run out of money and kids are going to starve. Kids aren't going to starve. They're going to sell sovereign land. You're going to have more countries. But if I wasn't running for president, fewer people would hear that message. And so it's you're right. It's not a perfect solution. I mean, obviously, I wish I could only ever drive on private roads. I have an easy pass, so I try to pay for roads when I can. My preference would be I would never, ever directly or indirectly use anything that was created by the state. And I'm working towards it. It isn't there yet. To me, the balloting, I mean, you have a great point. I mean, elections are not cheap. They're very expensive. And they're a waste of tax money. I don't think they should exist. I think you'd only have private land with private groups setting up their private laws. And we're just doing what we can to get there.
That's good. A fair answer. Appreciate the honesty. And that puts us at about the time that I have allotted for this. I appreciate you coming on the show. I'm glad we could keep it. Yeah, I'm glad we could keep it from devolving into a philosophical debate. If I just wasn't interested in that today, is sick of that after, mainly living online with this project. I'm so done with that. So talked about some good stuff. So I appreciate that. Maybe we can get you to stick around just for a minute after we stop this recording to do a little 5-10 minute bonus content for my patrons. I'd appreciate that. Sure. Awesome. Well, thanks.
Let's do that.
Awesome. Thanks everybody for listening. It's going to be a hard sell to get these people to vote, but you can tell them where to go if they want to look.
Yeah, no doubt. If they want to support the campaign, just go to votevohra.com.
All right. Awesome. And we'll catch you all next time.
Presidents, whatever.